Welcome to Debate of the Week, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me below, do you love this show? Do you hate this show? Do I need to give it something extra? I'd like to know. Now, this is about a versus. Who would win in a versus face match? With the character, with the back show talks, with everything. John Cena versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. This is what it comes down to. If you're going to compare the two, you have to look at them as faces for the majority of their time period. Now, I understand Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and I've always loved Ricky. I loved it when he did the Flame, when he came out, when he was in WWF as the Dragon, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I always liked Ricky. And when he went to WCW, when he breathed fire, I thought that was epic. I managed to see at least once and twice I saw Nitro. And I loved seeing Ricky. And I wonder what happened at one point where he disappeared. I didn't know that he messed up his back in a match. But the point is, the majority of his entire run, no matter where he went, was a face. Very rarely did he ever go heel. Maybe in the very, very beginning of his wrestling career, he was a heel. Maybe for a year, maybe two. But then he was all face. Compared to John Cena, who was like 2 or 3 years. In the very beginning, he was a very generic face. Then became heel for like 2 years at least. Then he switched back to a face and stayed like that the majority of his career so far, which is now 12 to 13 years almost. But who would win in an actual face-to-face? Who is the better face? It doesn't have to be a match, just comparing the two. Now, I'm sure everyone's going to say, dude, you must be joking. You know Steamboat is a better face than John Cena. Look at what happened when he went up against Jake the Snake Roberts. Look what happened when he went up against Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh yeah, you messing with my Miss Elizabeth. I'm going to come and rip your head off at WrestleMania 3. I'm telling you, easily you could say Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And I do agree. But it depends on what era you're talking about. If you're talking about the golden age of wrestling compared to the post-Attitude Era PG, where John Cena has spent most of his time, who would actually be over more? Now let's go to the golden age. It's obvious that things were way different back then. Wrestlers were given more time with their character, more time to build their gimmick. Many cases they went from multiple promotions like you could say Florida Championship Wrestling, WWCW, NWA, AWW, AWA, all those different promotions that have been out there for so many years. Many people went from one promotion to another, building up their craft until they made it to the WWF and made it to the big time, as everyone knows. Now, John Cena had existed in the early, let's say the early 80s to early to late 80s. Around that time. Because, well, let's say the early to late 80s, around the time of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was coming up himself. If you had these guys coming up around the same time, who would actually be over better? Now, if John Cena did not have the WWE machine making his character very generic, stable, the way they want it, I would say this. John Cena, I would believe, would not really be a face. He actually would be a heel. Now that kind of defeats the purpose of what we're doing here. Who is a better face? John Cena versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. But he would get a lot of versatility out of becoming a heel before he turns back into a face. A lot of times wrestlers have to go between different states to really learn how to be good at something. Now with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, he learned very early how to become a face, and he's stuck as a face, and people have always loved him because of it. He just has that attitude. With John Cena, I really believe he would have to keep jumping back and forth until he got it right. But it doesn't mean he wouldn't be well over as a face when he finally became one. He probably would make a good face. But comparing the two, not going into wrestling, I'll do that last, but in character development, if John Cena went to WCW, or NWA, or AWA, or WWCW, I'm taking a guess he would be a heel for most of that time. By the time he goes to WWE, he'll probably turn him into a face. And he'll probably be able to play a good face. But comparing to Ricky Dragon Steamboat, who just naturally is such a very great face, if they met one another, they would get along, you would see them on TV. But in the end, I believe that John Cena would turn into a heel. Even though face to face, one would be much better than the other, I do believe John Cena eventually would be turned heel because he wouldn't be able to match him. And that would be in the golden age of wrestling. Excuse me. Allergies. That's the golden age of wrestling, back in the 80s into the 90s, just before the Attitude Era. Now, let's go into the PG era, that's going into the reality era of the WWE right now. If Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was now up and coming, and the WWE still has John Cena as he is now, would John Cena be a better face than Ricky the Dragon Steamboat? To be honest, no. Let's be honest here. The way the WWE has been structured and promoted, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who will probably work out in RH maybe a couple of other promotions like Evolution, maybe he might go to Wrestle One like in Japan, then he go to AAA in Mexico, then he probably go to TNA, and then home his craft that way. And then after he'd been in TNA, he would move to the WWE. Now, you know how the WWE would feel about wrestlers that come from TNA or anywhere else. They wouldn't directly know how to deal with them. Even though he would be a great face with a huge following like a Daniel Bryan would or CM Punk. When it finally came to it, where he has great wrestling ability, great charisma, great in-ring, he basically is a 5-tool guy to me personally. You may think he's a 4, but essentially he is a 5-tool guy. But do I believe the WWE would really understand how to use him and promote him as a face? No. Essentially, you would have a much better face than a John Cena in a Steamboat. But because of how the WWE structured themselves, they would not promote Steamboat like they would a John Cena. Even though Steamboat would probably get over with the kids, he would get over with the adults, he'd get over with the women because, let's be honest, Steamboat, when he was young, is a better looking guy than John Cena. I'm sorry. Let's just be honest here. It's not the fact that he's got a tan more than John Cena. He just generally looks like a better looking guy. And this is a guy saying it. You get my point. But in the end, the WWE would probably not promote him. And if they do promote him, it would take many years and him being buried for most of those years, like a Bray Wyatt, like a Ryback, like a Bad News Barrett or Wade Barrett, like to a certain extent Daniel Bryan before they brought him up, and a CM Punk. He would be basically buried for many years until either 1, Steamboat got tired of it and left the WWE, 2, he stayed long enough that they finally realized they need someone new and then are forced to bring him up, and bring him up in such a generic way that whatever really good character he has is going to be very watered down. So would Steamboat work in the current post-PG reality era? No. And that's sad, because Steamboat, at the time that he was coming up, was great. He was a great wrestler. He was a great promoter. He knew how to talk. He had a certain way to work in the ring. He knew how to work with people in the ring. He knew how to put people over. So, putting it like this, Cena versus Steamboat. Who is the better face? Well, in the golden age of wrestling, Steamboat obviously would be a very good face. And John Cena would be a decent face if they didn't flip him into a heel eventually. In the post-PG reality era of the WWE, Steamboat would be a face. But unfortunately, the WWE would bury the man because 1, they wouldn't know how to use him. 2, they wouldn't want to hurt Cena. And 3, they would really only bring him up as a face as long as they made him highly generic. And also not as powerful as Cena would be if Cena was still there. So I hope you like this debate of the week. Please give me a comment below. Tell me if you want me to do another versus, like with maybe Stephanie McMahon versus Sensational Sherry or Miss Elizabeth. Tell me who you'd like me to do a versus next to. See ya!